Sophie, you were here a couple of years ago with Good Luck to You, Leo Grand, which was a really small-scale film. It was like 2 characters in a room. This is a much bigger story, so many more corners to it. I really want to know, like, what was the first scene that you wrote down? What was the moment where you're like, I really have to start telling the story?
I want to hear this.
Well, honestly, when my dad was dying, I was in a hospital room with him, and I was holding his hand and squeezing it because he couldn't speak. And I remember thinking to myself, I didn't think I'd make this film, but I remember thinking, oh, this is a moment that I don't feel like I get to see very often, and I want to remember what it feels like for something. Do you know? I don't know that I ever went, then I'm going to make a film about it, but I was definitely aware of it as a human, as a creator, do you know, in that moment. And after he passed away, I watched Aud. My dad was this very provocative gay man and very out loud about that. And I watched Aud, my teenager, who's sitting right next to me, come into their kind of experience of queerness and their own trans identity. And I just wished and longed to put them in a room together. I don't think I thought of it as them specifically. At the time, I just wanted a grandparent, a grandchild to talk to each other. And that's where the film started.
I mean, you found your star Aud close to home, being Aud's mother. Who came on next? Like, how did you start casting this?
Olivia came on next. It was a funny thing to be like, how are we going to cast this, 3 generations in one family? I think once we had the idea that Olivia would come on, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it didn't seem like anyone else could do the role at all. And then we eventually got it to Olivia. And until we cast that role, we didn't want to start thinking about anyone else. It was kind of like we needed that role. We knew that we needed to fill out the film because it's quite a big ensemble. And we would find our Jim when we found our Hannah. And of course, we had Aud. Yeah.
I mean, John, your character kind of controls the energy of every single scene that he's in. There's one scene I'd really just love to hear from all of you about the day of shooting it, which is you're sitting around a table and you're realizing you're not all sharing the same language and ideas when you talk about like gender and sexuality, and things get really tense. Tell me about that day on set. Tell me about shooting that scene, writing that scene, putting it together.
It's a very key scene for the character of Jim, because you've heard up until that point that Jim is trouble. He's adorable, he's irresistible, you can't help loving him, but he hurts people. He is selfish. And you don't really see evidence of that until that scene. And it's a scene in which they're arguing about bisexuality and sexual identity. And he's been a lifelong, passionate fighter for gay rights, beginning in the AIDS crisis way back in the 80s. And he's incredibly bullheaded when he gets up on his soapbox. He's magnificent because he's a great fighter for a great cause, but it's also made him kind of old guard and conservative. And he inadvertently really hurts his grandchild, Frances, whom he adores. And just glancingly, they stand up and leave the table. They can't endure it. And it's awful because they adore him. They worship him. And suddenly he's revealed just what he's capable of. The wonderful redemptive thing about him is that, first of all, he completely contradicts himself all the time. Changes gears immediately. And he also owns whatever he is and whatever he says. But you're right, he does take up all the oxygen. He bosses everybody around.
Aud, how was that for you? I mean, especially you're playing a scene that tense, that far, and this is your first lead role.
Yeah. Oh, no, look, it was amazing. It was an amazing table of people to be at. Sorry about my voice. To have John Lithgow and these 3 gorgeous Dutch actors and Olivia Colman with me was just mind-blowing. We actually shot that scene on my birthday. So it was this strange...
That's right.
Oh, we're arguing, but it's a great day. But it was tense, and difficult, but lovely. But it's probably the scene that's closest to reality. Like, I've gone through that conversation before. And so there were times where I was a bit triggered is the wrong word, but in my emotions a lot. And then, but it's easy with these two to just come right out of it as soon as cut is called, and it was easy to argue with you because we just chat. And yeah, it's wonderful actually.
The actors had in that, for me, that was such a joyful scene, even though I was very aware of Aud's feelings and how they might be inside of that. But the actors that came together in that, there was such a bond between you all. And before each take, you would be going, ooh, all together, like doing this incredible thing. And it was such a delight. Also, Matt Cormack, my co-writer, he really wrote those scenes, I think. And it was so much fun to read them. Like I found them, it was so exciting to see people actually argue. But yes, Jim is provocative and he also is careless in those scenes, because he wants to push his point, at the expense of others. And yet there's such a deep love and respect underneath all of that we can argue and we can talk about it. And it's a difficult thing for Francis. And it was really reflective of some of my experience as a parent, because there is a lot of time where you, as somebody who always wants to see both sides and wants to understand the experience of someone like Jim and the men that went through this really big trauma of the AIDS crisis and the feeling of starting to feel forgotten in that, wants to see that side and wants to see the side of a young person who's exploring their own identity and telling us who they are, There's also a part as a parent of a trans person that you go, I actually just have to work out how to stand up for my child and not see both sides in this moment. Like you can see both sides, but you need to stand up for the people that you love, stand with and for those people, And so that was a hardcore thing to do, wasn't it? Yeah.
Olivia is the person trying to hold all of those needs and contradictions, and I'm realizing now, hearing how many autobiographical roots there are in this story. I'm so sorry, but your haircuts are really similar to me. I mean, Olivia, did you feel as though this character you were mostly playing a version of your director, or were you adding some different bits to make her feel like your own as well?
Well, definitely reflect. I'm playing the person that's written on the page, but also I think everything you do is a bit of you. And weirdly, I really agree with the way Sophie feels about things and does things. So it was quite a big dose of me in it. And it's interesting watching when there's a big loud force. There's no point having two big loud forces. And so I sometimes have found myself, when differing of opinions, being quite calm and gentle about it and going, yeah, okay, but why not? And doing it the way, which is what you do. And I could see how this person, Hannah, has spent their life having to not be as big and loud as the person they're confronted with, but having to do it in a different way in order to try and get everyone to get to a point of reconciliation in some form.
Right.
And defending your child, but trying to do it gently. Yes. Yeah.
Well, and your character is also a filmmaker, and throughout the course of the film, we keep seeing you get notes from people on how this story should be told, and it starts to feel sort of meta. I mean, I'm wondering, Sophie, are some of these notes that she's getting in the film questions you had for yourself about how to tell this story, feedback you heard, and how to shape it?
I mean, I'm certainly interested in the idea of the many different versions of a story that can exist, and that the ones that we tell are useful or not useful to us at certain times, for sure. I think, again, my co-writer Matt is very interested in the idea of a drama without conflict, and so that really came out from him. I'm very interested in the idea of kindness and how we can tell stories where the characters respond with a kind of kindness. And so, it was a really fun part of it, I think, is to enjoy those elements. You have those conversations every day as a filmmaker, and they're helpful and sometimes not helpful.
There's a wonderful scene in the film in which Hannah is teaching director students. And you, in the course of that scene, you learn a lot about the way Sophie herself directs and talk about meta. We all experienced the way Sophie operates, the way Hannah operates, when Sophie prepared us for shooting. An extraordinary week in which she did the kinds of things she's instructing these young directors to do, just to make us connect deeply with each other as friends, as completely understanding characters, but also human beings. And in my opinion, you simply see that up on the screen. The way she illuminates relationships, and there are about 15 or 20 different relationships among this big extended community and family of the film. It just comes right out of the way Sophie has approached telling her own story.
I want to ask one question before we go, too, which is, you're having this film's big premiere in a week where the rights of LGBTQ Americans, transgender Americans in particular, are being dramatically cut back, hurt. I've kind of thought as a film critic that stories that make Americans feel connected to actual people, actual lives, do help lower some of those barriers of people who think it's just nothing they even have to worry about caring or protecting. I guess it's sort of a two-part question that I want to ask you guys, how can we encourage people to hit play on a story like this, go to the theater for a story like this, and help people make those ties to characters? And also, if there's just anything you'd like to add this week, in reaction to the news.
Well, we are storytellers and not preachers. When we were making the film, we didn't realize we were making an important, essential, and extremely timely film. We didn't know it would open the Sundance Festival a week after this extraordinary week we've just had. To me, it seems like just exactly what we need right now. It's a film about love in an atmosphere of hate and retribution. And people are fighting on behalf of hate. And we've got to fight on behalf of love. And we're storytellers. The only way we can do it is by appearing in a movie like this. Little did we know it was going to be such an essential moment for it.
Yeah, and I think, it's really easy to get bogged down in what is happening in the bad, right? But as John just said, there's so much good and there's so much love. And I think what's really special about this film is that it's a model for love. It's a model for how we can love each other and how we can hold each other up. And what I see in my communities is trans and queer people turning to each other, facing away from all of it and going, we have each other. We know how to hold each other up. We know how to build each other up. We can tell our stories. And it's very special to be part of that. And I hope people want to come and see that